Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. All right, so we will get started. We're 1 minute late, which I'm quite impressed about considering everything in my new time zone is totally discombobulated. Hi everyone. My name is Steph Sedgwick. I'm the founder of Clarity Web Design Studio, now based in Lethbridge, Alberta, instead of Windsor, Nova Scotia. Me and my agency, we help service-based founders rebuild websites that actually support their business goals. And we try to do that without any digital clutter and confusion or content overwhelm. Today's roundtable, I have two excellent guests with me. We're going to be talking a lot about getting out of the hamster wheel of the content chaos, which I think would probably resonate with just about everybody, every business owner out there. So if you've been bookmarking every new strategy, chasing trends, maybe struggling to stay consistent across like a lot of platforms, you're not alone. We've all been there. We've all been told just to post more, or you got to be everywhere, or we look at what other people are doing and we try to replicate it, and then we wonder why we're overwhelmed and off track. So this conversation today is going to be about shifting from reactive content creation to a more strategic system that can really help you support your growth. And we want to look at building a foundation. We're going to take a couple steps back, I think, and sort of look at what true content creation can mean for your business. I would suggest it's probably not about going viral. It's about building visibility that actually supports your goals. So you have to know what those goals are. And there's a big difference between attention, which is like the number of eyeballs that are seeing your content, and influence. And I actually have a little chart that I'm going to share on that later on. But I want you to sort of keep that distinction in mind as we talk today. So before we get into intros, this is an introduction, or I mean a little thing that came in a newsletter in my inbox today. Sean, I told you a little bit about this, but this is just a really cool little quote. And it really stuck with me, and I think it's perfect for today. And it is that attention is fun, but it's also shallow, it's fleeting, and it doesn't pay the bills. So influence is different. Influence is when someone thinks of you at the exact moment they want or need something. It's what gets you remembered, referred, and hired. And then she went on to say, attention is a spark that may or may not serve a purpose. Influence is a steady flame that heats your house. So influence builds over time, it survives distractions, and it sustains you. And I think that really hit home for me. And I think it captures exactly why a lot of us are going to be here today, because most of us don't necessarily need more followers or more content. We need content that actually builds trust and positions us really clearly and supports the kind of growth we actually want. So joining me today, two brilliant folks in the online sphere. We've got Ali Berry, who's an SEO strategist and founder of Ali Berry Consulting, and Sean Teasley, who's been a guest with us before, marketing strategist and social media expert and founder of Social Tonic. So let's get into it. If you guys want to do a quick little intro for yourselves, that would be perfect.
So Sean from Social Tonic, I'm in the Mountain Time Zone as well in the Denver area, along with Ali. And we are a digital marketing agency that specializes in social media and creating content for clients who just want to outsource their social media, or we have a 4-month training package to help people understand how to do social media in-house. So we love helping brands put their presence out online. But I'm the first person to say in any discovery call, like, let's talk about your anxiety about social media. Like, I'm not one of the people who says you should be doing this, this, and this, or Instagram is your best place. We need to figure that out through a strategy. And also, like, your mental health is really important. So I approach social in a bit of a different way, and one that's just like grounded in strategy and authenticity.
Awesome. I love it. I can't wait. Okay, great. And then Ali.
Yeah, I'm Ali Berry. I've been doing SEO for almost 15 years now. I did found Ali Berry Consulting, but I actually did take a full-time role a couple months ago. So I'm now the SEO director of a company called MarketWise. I have a couple consulting clients that remain. So open to smaller projects, but I really specialize in content strategy for search, as well as basically just helping businesses, come up with their content strategy, better understand their audience, figure out their distribution plans, kind of all of that good stuff, and then tying content back to revenue, which is something that I think gets lost sometimes in the shuffle of SEO. Making sure that all of our content has a greater purpose and is tied back to business goals.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for clarifying. I didn't realize that your role had shifted slightly. So that sounds really cool. Sounds like a great fit. That's wonderful. So are we ready to jump in? I have a few sort of guiding questions. Overall, this is just going to be a very casual conversation, and we can also share some tips and tricks, stuff that is hopefully relatively jargon-free and also accessible for anybody that's going to be watching this, so that it sort of makes sense and is really clear. So to start us off, so in that newsletter that I mentioned, it was from someone named Kim Scaravelli. This line about attention being a spark that may or may not serve a purpose, whereas influence is the steady flame that heats your house. What do you two think founders misunderstand the most when they're chasing those eyeballs and visibility? Like the most misunderstood thing?
I'm going to take it from a perspective of that they're not even doing anything yet. Because, so for instance, I just run into so many entrepreneurs in like the Denver market who are out doing networking, and they're making these amazing connections on LinkedIn, and then they're not doing like follow-ups, right? And that's just a part of their sales piece. But when you're not showing up on LinkedIn in creating content and just kind of showing like, hey, I went to this event, just very low hanging fruit type posts, you're not leaving breadcrumbs behind for all the effort that you put into an in-person event. So it's just like kind of missing this really easy thing that if you are going to invest in that time in person, or even the virtual networkings as well, you're making these new connections on LinkedIn, you got to leave something behind so that they can start to see you and your brand, but also your expertise. And this is the part that like builds that influence over time, because if you keep showing up in the feed with helpful, informative, industry leading things, it's going to build that expertise, and then you're naturally going to be the person that somebody's going to refer.
Nice. I love that breadcrumb thing. Allie, what would you say?
I would say I think like a lack of understanding of who the target audience is and should be. I feel like a lot of times people are going after anything and anyone, and they're looking at it strictly from like a volume and numbers game versus like is this a qualified lead game? And that really can lead to just a lot of, I mean, bad conversion rates, but also just burnout, right? As you're like trying to, you know, build like if you're just trying to build a large audience, I feel like that kind of just misses the point. It's way better to have like 20 engaged people than, hundreds of non-engaged people. Like I'm currently managing a YouTube channel with like 500,000 followers, and they're all from a previous era, and our numbers are terrible, right? So then it looks even worse because it looks like we have this audience that we actually don't, and so we don't actually understand our true like audience numbers. I feel like that happens everywhere all the time.
Yeah,
even if it's like
your pivot.
Yeah.
Right. Even your YouTube versus your email list, all of that. It's so important. I love that.
Yeah, that's really excellent. And I know like even with that numbers, the mismatch, that whole thing, like people get so caught up on the number of followers or the number of people on their email list. And I do frequently have folks who have, because we specialize with, women in business who've been in business for a while and have probably pivoted at least once, if not more than that. And that idea that they don't want to, there's this sort of like a fear of letting go of those people, that maybe there's a match there. There's this sort of fear that they don't want to let them go, even if they haven't engaged or they haven't sent them an email or they haven't, maybe they were from 10 years ago. Maybe they're on like some old email that it doesn't even exist anymore. But there's still that, feel it like you have to hold on to it. So what do you think that that's maybe a piece of this, this visibility piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a fear, it's almost like a fear of missing out, but instead it's like a fear of missing potential business that's like not there. You know what I mean? Just like, And you always want to see forward progress, right? So you want to see like numbers increasing. And actually, in a lot of cases, it would benefit a lot of business owners to be more concerned with like the engagement numbers and actually see the number of like followers fall, right? But knowing that
Yeah.
like it's actually like a good engaged audience.
Yeah. I
Because then you
love
could start again.
talk.
Yeah,
Yeah. With
exactly.
people that are actually interested.
Right.
And maybe
And then you have that form of momentum again, right? But you got to flatline it to
yeah.
like, I don't know, it's like dentistry, right? Carve out the cavity, the decay.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably not an analogy I would use with websites because that's a bit gross. But the we do find a similar thing with websites, right? Like because I've talked about this on other roundtables, even with my own website. When I started back in 2010, we were also offering graphic design. And back in those days, it was like you build the website, you launch the website, now you need a blog because that was like this is the only way that this works. And then you have to create, your content. So I had all of these articles on the blog about graphic design. And one of the most popular, so after I stopped offering graphic design, because I'm not a graphic designer, like it's not my jam. And it was several years ago that I removed that part of the business. And I kept up this blog article that was about how to properly size a logo for your business because it was the top performing post on my website. Literally nothing to do with my current audience. No conversions into my current stream from it. But there is that weird like, oh, but it's really popular. Oh, people are reading it. Oh, they're getting something out of it. But are they? Like,
Right.
really? And what are they getting out of it? It's saying the same thing as 100 other websites, from people who are more qualified to talk about that than me. And yeah, that intentional piece. And so when I archived that content, it was great. It's like cleaning out your closet. It just removes that pressure and that weight, and you say, you know what, I'm just going to release this because it's not serving me. And I honestly, I don't think it's serving my clients.
It's like the Marie Kondo of
Absolutely. Yeah, we talk about that a lot with our website rebuilds, where we're just like, who's this serving? Anybody? And who is that person? Like Ali was saying, like who is your audience? No, really.
Yeah.
And it's funny how we get into this, this trap where, because I hear this a lot, where say if you've niched down, like a lot of us would after several years, to sort of have I certainly in my business have a pretty clear idea who my ideal client is. And so a lot of our messaging is created specifically for that person. But even I still find myself kind of going, well, but what about these other people? They would, like, everybody would benefit from a kick-ass website, pardon my language. But I mean, really, everybody would. But that doesn't mean I have to provide it to them. That doesn't mean I'd be the right fit for them, let alone them being the right fit for me. So it's interesting as this, I don't know if it's maybe like a marketing refrain that keeps coming up about more is better, or what that thing is. But like I do find it's still, even after, like Ali, I'm sure, after 15 years, it's still coming up, from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it always will. And now we have AI where you can just scale a bunch of, mediocre content quickly. So like it just got easier, right? And so it is like a completely, it's the same battle with new tools. And it truly is just this cyclical thing. And I do think it's psychological in that like we are trained to believe that more is better.
Yeah. More AI is not better.
No.
That's so interesting to go
seeing
back
the numbers on that.
to think about, like when we have these discovery calls with our potential clients, right, of new people. For instance, I was doing a call with a crisis and suicide center, and it nonprofit, and I said, okay, I need to go back to my team to make sure that like everyone on the team is okay creating this type of content, that there are no triggers inside of my team, because like that would be a really big deal. And so really like understanding, is this the right client to move forward with? And everybody was excited about it. They're like, oh yes, I would feel really passionate about creating content for this, right? And then, oh, we are the right fit, right? But you have to check in and look at it from a couple of different angles before you just say like, we can do this.
Yeah. So would you say, I'm going off script here, would you say that this is sort of like shifting your mindset into creating relationships, genuine and authentic relationships, where a piece of this is respecting the other person and saying, if we're not the right fit, it'll be better for you, to know that going in. And of course, I'm also better for us with our agencies and our teams. But I wonder if part of this whole thing is that I think that relationship piece, it's like when you're talking about with the breadcrumbs, you've sort of set all of this activity in play, but there's no follow-up. There's no true relationship there because it's like you're just going, what? And then you turn your back. You get busy doing something else or whatever. It's interesting because we talk a lot about authenticity and these sort of genuine client relationships, and then how to make sure that the things that you're posting online are geared towards that. It's kind of like that targeted goal, like we were talking about before. But it is hard to lose sight of that when you're busy, especially if you're a solopreneur. Maybe you don't have a team, and you sort of feel like you have to do all of the things yesterday, or maybe you want to do all of the things and have it all in place. It's definitely one of the challenges, right, of being a business owner.
Well, I think it also leaves a lasting impression. So if you were to say, we're not the right fit for you, but I'm going to refer you to another person and you can see if they're the right fit, then that leaves this tone of like integrity and likability, honestly, just truth, that they'll probably refer you if they know somebody that would be in your realm of, genius too. So I think it leaves a really good taste to do that disconnection in a very kind way too, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely like the biggest trust builder, right? To be able to say like, I don't want you to waste your money. Like, I think we've all said that to somebody before, right? And then like, they're way more likely to circle back later, come to you again for, another referral or what have you. But yeah, I completely agree. Like, just to be honest and authentic goes a long way.
Yeah. So what would you say? I'm not sure what level of what stage of business the people that will watch this, would be at. But would you say that what would you say about the confidence required to take that kind of a step? Because I think it's certainly not something that I had the confidence to do in the beginning, like in the early days of my business, where it felt like I couldn't say no to anybody, and I just had to say yes, 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 yes. I just need to keep this afloat, Do you think that there's something there that we could address here?
That is a tricky question, right? Because it comes down to like, how can you afford to say no? Like truly, money wise, do you have a staff that you're also supporting? Like that's a whole nother layer of stress too. Sure, everybody on this call has accepted business that wasn't right for them for that reason, right? But I feel like in the end of the day, I think about things like retention and, that relationship. And if you're not the right fit, it's not going to be a good engagement on either end. And so thinking about kind of the trade-offs of, the risk of somebody not being happy with your work and what that could mean further down the line, versus like how badly you really need that revenue.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that level of courage, because, sorry, go ahead.
Well, when you end an engagement, I think it's really important to document what went well and what didn't go well, so that can help you guide you in taking on new clients. So, for instance, we white labeled with another marketing agency who didn't offer social media services, and so we came in. I thought this was like a really good fit. I was really excited because it was in the tourism business, and that's one of our niches that we're in. However, it was a very large company that then the end client was, and they had 11 people in their marketing department that wanted to give me feedback on our social media. Too many. So, that engagement did end because it was a very specific dated contract. When that ended, I was like, okay, team, we need to understand what was it? It was too many meetings. Like we don't meet with our clients. That's one of our enormous benefits, is that clients just like forward us emails and it turns into content. versus like when I need to have a meeting about this and all these different things. And for some teams, that's really great. That's not how our team works. And we weren't priced appropriate, honestly, for any meetings. So to then decompress that and realize that, then it helps you understand them moving forward versus like, oh, that was a crappy client. But if you don't like slow down, realize, okay, I'm not going to accept that. And then that's just where the confidence starts to build. You're like, no, not again.
So it's a similar, so even though that's a partnership kind of a conversation, it's a very similar sort of thing. You need to do that. And I would say you need to allow yourself the grace to experiment and the grace to accept that it's not always going to look the way you want it to look. And that's okay, because that's part of the joys of being in business for yourself, is that you have to learn these things sometimes the hard way, you know.
Right.
Yeah, that's neat though. But I like that. I like that it's still coming back to that understanding both what you're offering and what the other person is bringing, whether it's a client or, and whether they're on social media or like a partner platform or something like that. So that's really cool. So then if we take that, so I think we've established that we need to know who we're marketing to, so who those people are, and that maybe that's the piece that is one of the biggest missing elements when people get started on these social media. Like, it's so easy to sign up for a social platform. It takes minutes, to get started, and all these people are like, oh, you got to be here, oh, you got to be here, oh, you got to be here. So then you start doing the things, and you never really take that moment to step back and assess what am I doing? What is this platform? What am I trying to achieve? What are my goals here? So then, let's say you've chosen your specific areas, your specific platforms that you want to be on for that content. My next question is about content pillars. I'm not sure that we're ready to really talk about content pillars yet. I feel like we still need to go back a step. What would you say then if someone has chosen? So let's say they've identified who their person is that they want to speak to with their content creation strategy. What then would be the next step?
I would say, before you start creating any content, it really comes back to your goals. So like, what are you hoping to achieve through content, right? Is it driving leads? Is it driving direct business? Is it, I don't know, it's like ad revenue from eyeballs? Like, all three of those things lead to different types of content and a different type of funnel. And so I think that's where I would start before even creating pillars.
Yeah. And I'd also say, like we were talking about just a few minutes earlier, is that the less is more. I feel that way about social media. If we're starting from scratch, I always say 2 channels max, 2 platforms max, because we can always build later. But if all of a sudden you die off on a channel, then it kind of also leaves this like mysterious feeling to it. So first start with the strategy, identify where your audience is spending that time and where it's appropriate. So for me, it's the strategy piece. And then just like what Allie was saying is, what's the goal? And Allie and I did a presentation with a co-working space. And so we use them as actually a case study. And we took the goal of, they had 5 open private offices, that's what they were trying to fill. So then, okay, let's create the content around what's going to funnel into helping convert those 5 offices. And so just like what she's saying, like, that's the goal. We got to fill these offices because, it was like summer was coming and less people, kids are at home. So there's this like influx of parents and, they don't use as many co-working spaces, or maybe they do because they're like, I can't stand my kids, I got to get out. So and then that guides the content too of how we're going to speak to them. Do you need your adult camp to get away for yourself and be in adult playland versus your kids' playland?
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because I think, and I was going to tag on there that, do you find with the work that you both do you find it common for people to lose track of what they've already created? Both both in terms of the actual content and the places that it's been put, like the different platforms.
Oh yeah. For me, because they're in social media, we can repost things because the likelihood that your entire audience saw something is way less than 20%. So
Yeah.
let's say that you created a promo video and you spent a lot of money on this video. You can post that once a quarter and have no fear that like everybody is going to see that over and over and they're going to get tired of it. That's just not the likelihood. So when you invest in really good pieces like that, or for instance, like Allie would approach something, I'm going to speak for her at the moment, but like going through this kind of like case study, or we're going to do a survey or gather some data and then present it in this study kind of way, that can be broken down in 12 pieces. So yeah, I think like, and if it's a study that you did and it's for 2025, I mean, use it, you know, month over month and pull a statistic or a number from it. But I think completely people post it and they're like, everybody saw it, so we can't use it again. And you're like, well, actually, the numbers on the website actually say that everybody saw it. So yeah, I don't know. Allie, I'm sure you have more to fill in on this one.
Yeah. So like yes to all of that for social, and also no to that for content. Like I do work for a company that has been reposting articles and like not advisable for search, in that you're just confusing search engines by giving them duplicate versions of the same thing and they don't know which one to rank, and then they both don't rank. So that's like something to keep in mind. But instead for content, it's really like I do agree that a lot of people lose track of what they've already posted. But if you have, this is where having pillars is helpful, right? You have kind of your core topic areas that you want to cover based on who your target audience is and what you do. It's great to create a number of different articles or posts or whatever kind of content you're creating, video, whatever it is, that are all related, right? So it's like different takes on something. So like what Sean is bringing up is like a survey study for the co-working space. We were talking about like surveying their current members of like what value they're getting out of it, right? That would be a great way to be able to develop some marketing content and quotes from like directly from their people. There's a lot of different ways you can approach that same topic of, you know, the advantages to having a co-working space, right? We could have articles that are about networking events. We can have articles that, you know, just talk about the networking impact of being around other entrepreneurs, right? There's just like you could create an entire content like cluster of content that's dedicated to that very topic. And so that's kind of how I would approach that, is just like different takes and different styles of content about that same kind of topic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love content clusters.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about Marie Kondo, and I'm not
Mhm.
sure if we're about to keep talking about Marie Kondo on these, like actually use her name. But when we come in and do a rebuild for a website, especially one that has a lot of content on it, and it's that part of that, you know, they put so much time and effort and energy into writing all of these articles that a lot of people aren't reading. And so then we try to be more intentionally curating what actually gets published on the website. So we just say, who really needs all of this? And we try to, if they have enough content, it's often fairly straightforward to identify some potential pillars and clusters that might sort of really help serve not only their end user who can find it more easily on the website, but also it makes it easier for them to integrate it into a social strategy because they have that like a library that they can directly refer to rather than just say, here's my website, good luck finding the relevant piece for you, for your situation. So yeah, so that's interesting. And I like that a lot. But I wondered also, a lot of our clients will frequently have set up a platform at some point in the past and either lost access to it because they
Mm.
changed devices or they lost their logins or whatever, but some rules changed, or they've forgotten that they had it at all. And so sometimes we have to do a fairly deep dive to sort of say, wait, did you know you're also here and you last posted 2 years ago? Maybe we want to clean that up. You know, do you have some way to is there some trick that you guys use to sort of track that stuff when people are creating those platforms?
That's an interesting question. I mean, from a search perspective, if you just go to Google and you type in site, SITE colon, and then your domain, and then hit enter, you're going to get all of the content that's indexed in Google from your website. And that's actually a really good way to inventory, because sometimes you don't, like you could also run a crawl if you have access to a tool, like a Screaming Frog is the tool that a lot of SEO people use, just to see all of the content that Google can find. You can do it either way. But that's a really good way just to see like, oh, what is this? And like, what is this subfolder? And where
Yeah,
did this come from? You will
yeah,
definitely find surprises on sites of all ages and just like, volume of content. So that would be
yeah.
a good way, I think, to approach that.
But that's only for websites, right? That doesn't work
Yeah,
for
it
social
doesn't
media.
work for social.
Yeah, for
Right.
social,
Yeah.
because we start any engagement, either if we're training you on how to keep it in-house or if we're going to actually do the content for you, we start everything with a strategy, and that's just found immediately in that is
Oh,
we want
yeah.
to do an audit of anything that has been posted in the past and glean things that like performed well. And then also because we're also checking out your competition, we're seeing what they're doing and maybe the gap between all of that. And so it's just unearthed in the phase for us of the strategy. And if there is an account that is live, I mean, many of our clients, we then say, okay, well, they're not focused at all on X right now because of whatever reason, and they're not willing to shut it down yet. And that's fine. But then we post once a month. Right. And it's once a month, something fresh comes up so that if somebody stumbles upon that account, they know it's, you're still alive and thriving and your business is going, but that's not right. And for instance, like with my own business, because I don't believe Instagram is the place for me to be getting new social media clients. I think that LinkedIn is the place for us completely, but I have a few posts on our social profile over there, and then it says we're active on LinkedIn, find us there, and it directs you to where we are active. So I mean there's a couple of ways that if an account is dormant, I guess I'd probably say that you can with it.
Yeah. I like that because that's like guiding them to those breadcrumbs. So rather than just saying, here's the stuff that somebody told me to post on Instagram, whenever that was, and then it turned out that I hated it, then at least it's still, and honestly, we try to keep that when we're doing like websites. It's always that, what are those they're not goalposts. What are those guiding directions, for the person who's finding you, and where do you want them to go next? So that was actually something I was going to ask you for the content that you're recommending for your folks. I'm assuming that there would be a call to action of some kind included in most, if not all, of the content that you create. Would you agree, or what would your opinion be for that?
I definitely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not thinking about that as you're planning content, you're missing a really big piece of this, which is in the end of the day, what do you want somebody to do once they've consumed this content, right? Like there should be an action, even if it's just a read more, read deeper, whatever that is a valid CTA. But even more valuable in a lot of business cases would be to capture an email, to give them a deeper something behind that email wall. Like to me, that's how you build a really healthy funnel, if depending on what you're selling. But if you are like just trying to generate ad revenue and you just need traffic to do that, like then your CTA is probably just keeping people on site, right? Read more, read more. But there's always something.
Yeah. I
And
think that's
on the
another piece that gets lost. Sorry.
From the social perspective, though, we're very careful about this because we really adhere to a rule that we have it for our agency is to not give more than 50% of our content with links. So we call it our linking ratio, because if you're driving traffic in every single post away from LinkedIn or Instagram, well, Instagram's a little bit different because they don't put the link in there, but Facebook, then the algorithm picks up on that and says, every time they post, they want to drive people off of our platform. And then that tells the algorithm, "Hey, don't show it to as many people because they don't want to keep people on their platform." So the CTAs vary, right? And so we're always considering like, okay, so, a common package for us is like 12 posts a month, which is 3 a week. Of those, 6 have links and 6 don't. And there's also CTAs for the 6 that don't have links. It's comment, it's DM, it's share something, or check out our LinkedIn article, because then you're staying inside of LinkedIn, and so that it just doesn't drive the traffic away and then feed the algorithm a message that says, don't show our stuff to as many people. So yeah, there's always CTAs, but for social, it's a little bit different in how many times we actually put a link in something.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I've always we've heard a lot about that, with the external links getting devalued on those social platforms, because of course they want you to stay on their platform because it's their platform. But it's interesting. So here's a question. This one might be more directed to Ali. This is a question that I've had over the last year or two, which was around when the search results, like say on Google search, LinkedIn content is searchable. And you don't need a LinkedIn profile to log in to read, like say somebody posts something on LinkedIn. So I have a lot of clients who want to share an article on their blog and then copy that same content onto LinkedIn. And the question that I haven't been able to get a solid answer on, and maybe you have some insight, would be, is there any cannibalization of their own content happening between those two? Or, I mean, most of my clients, their websites are quite small. So as far as like a domain authority goes, LinkedIn is always going to be top of the list in terms of the results. So is that a valid concern, would you say? Or is that...
I want to add one more thing to that, because I want to hear this answer too. And this came up with a client of mine too, because they're using Substack as well. And so they were talking about like, okay, can we do the same thing over on Substack as on our website? And I gave them advice. I'm so curious what Ali has to say.
Yeah, I just did a very large POV for my company on this too, because Substack is something they're all talking about too. So one, I do think there is a danger in just duplicating your content for all of the reasons stated. One version might rank, one version probably won't. And I mean, yes, it's going to be the LinkedIn version. It's going to be the Substack version because those are the more authoritative sites. I think there's always a risk of building too much of a strategy on somebody else's land. So like LinkedIn, Substack, whatever it is, you just don't know the future of that platform. And so in this POV that I wrote too, like I gave examples of like LinkedIn Pulse. Well, first it was Pulse, and then it became LinkedIn Pulse, and then it disintegrated. Medium used to be all the rage. It was like the precursor to Substack. It's still there, but pretty much gone, and has lost a lot of its authority and a lot of its audience with just all of its monetization shifts. And Twitter, which is now a dumpster fire. Like that's another good example of like the platform still exists. It's still got a ton of audience, and it is not the same audience it once was. And so if you built a strategy on those platforms alone without a web strategy, like you're starting over essentially, right? Because it's really hard to bring that audience over. They've abandoned ship. They're not that loyal to you, like if something changes overnight, like Twitter is probably the best example, right? Where suddenly you're like, this doesn't necessarily align with a platform I want to be on. In a lot of cases, we lost like, I don't know, I think it was like 15-20% of people worldwide on that platform. Obviously, some new people have joined, but they're not the same. So I would say building that content should really be your website. You can do a LinkedIn post, and you should be taking that content and creating several LinkedIn posts based on that larger article that you wrote on your website, but you got to change the content. So like, don't just copy and paste, but like, do kind of a break it up like Sean was talking about earlier with like a study, right? Break that content up into pieces and do a series of posts on LinkedIn. That's going to do better. It's going to give you more real estate in search, and your core piece of content, you own it. It's your website. Only you determine the future of that. Whereas like, I mean, Substack will probably be huge for another couple of years, and then something will happen, right? Like that's just how it always goes in this world.
Yeah. And that's
That's
pretty
beautiful.
much the advice I gave as well in this space is to, but then to also, if you want to put something over on Substack, or if you want to do the LinkedIn article, do a little like preview or like a
Yep.
recap and then drive them to the website, right?
Yep.
So it could be like making so like if you take your like H2s of whatever is in the article and then that's like giving them a little sneak peek of what's over there, then that helps drive it. So you're sharing something, it's similar, it's a preview of what's
Yeah,
over there too. So
exactly. That's exactly
and
how I do too. Yep.
and this is
Yeah.
a really common when I work in the travel industry, with either like tours or in the hotels, a bed and breakfast, like inns kind of thing, is that they depend so heavily on these online travel agencies, the OTAs. So like Expedia or TripAdvisor. And you're giving them all the control by saying, okay, I'm listing my property over here. You have to book through them. I'm going to give you somewhere between 20 and 30% of a commission. But if you could really use your own website for direct bookings, this is the value, and you're not so reliant on them, and you don't have to pay the fee. It does take a content strategy to be able to shift it over to that space, though.
Yep.
Yeah, we've done roundtables in the past where we talked about it. It's rented land. You know, you don't own this. You don't own the user journey on that platform. If it's like what Ali was saying, like it has to work, you know, together with your web strategy, really ideally. But I do think, because I think websites can kind of complex for most to be doing there, whereas the social medias appear to be more easily understood. Like you have an app on your phone, you know, you click, you log in, you don't have to, you know, remember how you did the thing the last time necessarily. So I think a bit of a challenge there for a lot of it, different from, you know, we have website maintenance program, like an ongoing sort of a care plan for people so that we can look after the website for them, mainly because the technology changes all the time. And then every time you log something, it looks a little bit different. You know, so maybe the instructions we gave you how to post something has changed because WordPress has changed, or because, you know, the browser's changed, or, you know, whatever. So I think part of the challenge from my perspective, partly because I hate social media. So no matter how intentional or strategic, I still like, there's some weird sort of residual resistance that I have that really flavors everything I do on social media. But the idea, I think, I lost track of what I was going to say, but the idea that, you know, we're all doing so many things and the content ends up feeling like another chore, like another task. And then if it's easier to do that task on social than it is on the website, then it's going to take more of your energy and attention. And I think it's really easy then to lose that strategic overview. So it's an interesting challenge. But yeah, a friend of mine in Nova Scotia, we did a roundtable a few months back, and she talked about when she lost her Instagram, which was the primary vehicle for driving eyeballs and visibility for her event organization. When she lost access to that and she ended up having to start over with a thing, the original one is still there. So then you've got that additional challenge. Like, how do you compete against your own stuff and show that, you know, like it's just sort of such a headache, really, at the end of the day. But an interesting tip that someone mentioned recently to me that I haven't done before, and I still haven't done it, but I think it was a great idea on LinkedIn, that you can export your contacts so that you have that as a backup for the network that you're building on LinkedIn. Have either of you ever tried that?
I did that a couple of years ago. I haven't done it lately. And I think you can only do that for your personal profile. I don't think you can do that for your company, for a business profile.
Oh,
But I'd have to look at that because that hasn't come up
interesting.
in a need.
That would make
Yeah.
sense, just because like if you left a company, they would not want you to, like, especially if you're in sales, which is what that probably exists for. I can see a lot of potential repercussions there. That is interesting, though. And I mean, I feel like if it's possible, worth doing periodically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what is really interesting stuff to kind of like bring this back is what we were talking, like going back to this case study of this co-working space, and Allie having this idea of like, okay, let's survey our membership, and are they getting business leads from being there? Like, what are the benefits that they're getting? And we start with that like overarching idea, and then we decide, oh, we're going to make a reel later for Instagram, or this is going to the website, but like making sure that the idea one is just ultimately feeding your website, and then from your website then it's feeding your socials or Substack or I don't know, Reddit too, in the sense, right, of other things. But
Yeah.
looking at it in that perspective, from this co-working space, they have a Slack channel, they have a newsletter, they actually print things to post around the kitchen. So they have a lot of different touch points for their members. And to then look at that. And so that's why this was like such a great example, because there's, this tangible printed piece that's in the kitchen on the refrigerators and things like that too. But to then, really start with this upper level thing before you think about where you're going to put it. And which is connected to the goal of, filling office space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And it's true. It comes back to that. Like, what is the purpose of this? Why are we putting any time into this at all? Interestingly, so I'm in a business coaching program, and we just recently developed, based like from the advice of the business coaching team, each of us have set a 6-week sprint. Have you guys ever done sprints in your business?
Mm-hmm.
It's where you put all of you choose that primary task, that primary focus, and then all of your efforts. Of course, there's going to be other stuff you're doing every day, but 6-week sprint is focused on a success for that goal or achieving that goal, whether it's successful or not. So it's really interesting, because then if you say, I want to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this all before the end of the year or before the next quarter, but then you look back at that sprint goal and you can say, well, which of those things that I say I want to do are going to move the needle towards that goal? They're going to take me off track, distract. And I wonder if maybe that kind of an approach would be useful with this with the content strategy, and just saying, this is my focus for Q4, or maybe that's too short. I don't know. Maybe 6 months, that sort of a goal, 6 to 9. Say, here's what I want to do over the next 6 months, and anything that I publish online is going to lead towards that. Would you agree, or what do you think about that idea?
I like that idea, especially for small business, right? Because you've only got so many hours and so many hands, and like it's way better to be focused on one goal, I feel like, and maybe it's one topic area more broadly. It also is going to create efficiencies, because if you're only focused in like one content area, it's a lot easier to produce more content quickly than if you're like trying to hit a lot of different topics, right? There's like, you can do the research essentially once. So yeah, I love that idea. I I did work with a smaller business consulting. They're like 20 people, right? But they have several websites that are all in the finance space. And I feel like they were actually doing that. They didn't call it necessarily a sprint, but everything was like, we are building up this pillar right now of like crypto content, for example. And so, like, that's where we all were focused for it. I think a quarter was actually appropriate, because you do want to build multiple, like you want to build like a hub page or a pillar page, and then you want that like spoke content around it to like, so that all of that content can thrive. Because if you're just doing like a one-off post about this topic and then a one-off post about this topic, you're not connecting those back to each other, you're not linking those back to like a hub, you're not building any sort of authority or space around that topic. So I guess I'm all for this idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm actually doing that a little bit in my business.
Yeah.
I'm doing it a little bit in my business. I'm doing a big push at case studies for my training package. So it's like a kickstart. We do your social media for the first month, and then we train whoever's on the team to then be able to do that for the rest of the year. We create a content calendar for them to follow, all these different things. And so my big push is revisiting all of the past clients that have gone through my training package, and you get into a rhythm. And this is also why I love in social media that we batch out the content for the month, because you have this overarching theme. There's like synergies between the posts for the entire month. Yet, of course, there's going to be other themes that you're going to be hitting in the month, but it just feels like this holistic piece to it. So then your like creative juices get going, and you can really funnel it in. So no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I actually, in my business book club, we read the book called The One Thing. And basically it's what you're saying, Steph, is you focus on the one thing until you accomplish it. And there's this one quote from it is, I'm going to not do it correctly, but basically it's be a postage stamp, adhere yourself to the thing until you get there.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're just like waiting, and like you're just feeding all of your energy into this one thing. And so then when you start your day, you're like, okay, is this gonna move the needle for whatever you're focused on for that quarter, or whatever you're gonna call as a sprint?
Yeah, that was interesting. Hey, I just achieved a cross-country move, and for the last probably 4 months, certainly since we listed the house for sale, everything that I did, because I'm I'm a solopreneur, but I have a team and I have teenagers, and I'm like the single mom kind of thing, and so there's a lot of stuff happening at any given moment generally, and I think that's true for all of us, especially women in business. And so for the last 4 months, that primary objective was to move. Anything that didn't align, or took up too much time, or I didn't have enough clarity on, so I was like, oh, it's going to take me too much time to figure this out right now. It's off the radar, and it's okay, because I think that's a big part of it too, is we have to give ourselves permission to say, I'm just not going to focus on that right now, because this is my end goal, and that's going to look different for everybody, of course, but yeah, that was almost like a massive, and super, it's like an exercise in super focus, hyper focus, kind of. So a lot of things that I might have, spent a couple of hours on, maybe I'll do this while I'm waiting for whatever. I didn't do that this time because I couldn't, like I literally couldn't. But it was really helpful, because it was fascinating to sort of see the difference it made to my day to day as well, because I wasn't spending time on sort of nitpicky stuff. That doesn't mean it's off my list entirely. It's just maybe sort of more on the back burner where it deserves to be. Whereas the primary focus was making sure that the business was going to be on an even, sustainable footing, so that the fact that I would be out of cell service for days at a time, it's okay. That it was gonna be okay. And I think that kind of, it's like a laser focus. You can't maintain that long term. Well, I can't maintain that kind of laser focus long term. But for like a short term, like say if someone was trying to come up with a content strategy, let's say we set a target coming out of this roundtable that Q4 is going to be X, whatever that is. Whatever that, like maybe the goal is more eyeballs, maybe the goal is more clicks through to your sales page, or your booking page, or whatever that goal is. And then reverse engineer your content to align it, with that focused goal. I think that would be really interesting. I'd love to see. I know there's not a lot of folks live here right now, but I'd love to see if if that resonates with anybody, and if they do that. Maybe I will, but it's not on my list right now, so I'm not going to add it. So something else that comes up a lot that I think would be interesting to hear your perspective on. I think this repurposing content is almost like a hot button sort of term the last year or so. And I wonder what you guys think in terms of how this, how you can use, we've talked about repurposing a little bit, like on LinkedIn, like doing the snippets and things. But for someone who doesn't have that content strategy yet in place, does repurposing fit into that content strategy, or is it a diversion? like a distraction?
Oh, I think it absolutely has a place. And especially, I think Ali will probably touch on it, but like this evergreen content is, something that will have like legs that just is, it's not date sensitive or seasonality attached.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So
repurposing,
specifically for a website.
yeah, I mean, I think it's key because you want to get as much mileage as you can out of everything you create, right? So if you've got a topic, it's way more efficient and easier to repurpose, to take different angles versus like new. And then I think the other piece that gets forgotten, like what Sean's talking about with evergreen content, is actually doing updates to it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it's actually better from an SEO perspective not to. So if you do, say you have a page that is only live for the holidays every year, keep that same URL, just update the content on an annual basis, right? And get ahead of it. So if it's something you need for November going into the holidays, like make sure you are ready to go like before. And the sooner you can update that content, the better it can potentially do ranking wise. But any like efforts that you put into those pages year in and year out, and maybe you get links to them from someone else or whatever, you want to build up that authority over time. So you want it to be on that same page versus like recreating a new one that's like Christmas 2025. Like that's not a great practice. So I guess that would be my take. But I think repurposing, updating, all of that is in some ways more important than creating new all the time. And I think that new gets prioritized a lot more because new is shiny and new. Whereas like actually doing that grunt work of updating and repurposing, like you can get a lot out of that for less effort. And that I feel like is the big hack for a small business owner.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, we talked a little bit about content pillars and stuff, right? The content that's on the website. But I kind of like how you said, like to reuse the same domain as well, because I think that often does get missed because of the new, or if you do have the date in the URL, that's maybe a different conversation. But yeah, the updating the content, I think, is often super missed, especially if you have a call to action, because we see a lot of folks that, because all these different platforms and so much different technology. So maybe you're using like a booking calendar on one system, and you create a bunch of content around that, and the calls to action in that content are to go book a consult with that calendar link. But then in a year or two, you're not using that calendar link anymore. That link is now a 404.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's going to push down your content as far as like search results, but it's also made a really crappy experience for someone who does find that and tries to book a call. And then what are they going to do? Are they going to go back to your website and find the right thing, or are they going to be like, ugh, I don't have time? You know.
Yeah,
So
like
yeah,
breaking
keeping things up to
trust.
date is yeah.
Yeah, that and like
Yeah,
you see
and not intentionally. Like it's an inadvertent thing.
exactly. And you're potentially just completely losing that person that was qualified. I will say
Yeah.
marketing departments too love to create like microsites for a promo. They'll just like create, it's a
Yeah.
new URL, it's a vanity URL. Um, all of that is really terrible for your SEO. And it's way better to host any of that on your actual domain and to have a unique subfolder for it versus like some random, this is give me a brand, doesn't matter. Just like a
Yeah.
one-off, we all know, right? Vanity URL.
Yeah.
It
We've
just
all done
like
it.
those
Yeah.
are talking about things that you lose track of. That's like number one, right? Is like you set that up once, you run something on it, you forget about it. You probably don't even ever turn it off too, like so that I would say
Yeah.
like always go in favor of your actual domain, have it on a page there. And then make sure that you kill those pages accordingly if the promo is over, but like keep that URL, you can reuse it again and again. And so like be smart about that because it's way better to keep using that same URL over time and building the authority of that page, and that page has like more age and longevity and all of that. than constantly starting new.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
I'll
love
add
that. I love that. Yeah.
I'll add another
Sorry,
piece
I have a delay.
because, you know, I think you do, because I'm getting a little bit of a fuzz from you too on your video. But one thing that, you know, is a part of this whole like strategy and deciding on the pillars and what you're going to do is understanding the pain points. And a pain point from 2024 may have evolved to a different pain point in 2025. So then going back into your website pages and updating, okay, here's what the now pain points are of my clients or potential clients, like that just has to happen. And it's so valuable in that space too, because then you're really talking to your ideal customer, because you're talking about the pain points, and then they can imagine themselves using your services, your products, the whatever.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, you know, when we said about keeping that, again, it's keeping that overall target and that goal and that audience, like that person in mind. So if you're just copy pasting stuff that you've used before, whether it worked back then or not, if you're just kind of putting it back out there again without thinking about that change, and you know, if maybe the call to action needs to be different, or maybe the reason that pain point exists has changed, you know, then that's a huge consideration. So I would love to bring in, so like there's a couple of things that I wanted to make sure we talk about. One is that you know, we see a lot of talk around the number of hours that, because online users are really savvy these days, and so we're often researching quite a bit before we ever engage with a business. So we've learned a little bit about the founder. We might have read some articles that they've written. We might have watched some YouTube videos, maybe a podcast. So there's a twofold question that I have, which is around how do we factor in that different people have different ways of consuming content that they prefer? You know, so that, you know, like I loathe videos, hate them a lot. If they don't have captions, I don't watch them. I read the captions of a video. I whatever little soundtrack you chose, you know, that you spent hours trying to pick the right one, it's lost on me because I'm not going to listen to it. And that's not a disability related thing. That's just a personal choice, personal preference. So, but when we get started into talking about accessibility and user preferences, the idea of only creating stuff on LinkedIn or only creating something in a PDF download, or you know, whatever the thing is, kind of starts coming back into that conversation around the choice that we make around the types of content that we're creating. So I wonder if, as far as the overall strategy goes, is there a value, do you think, going into 2025, and given that everything is changing with AI and et cetera, is there a value to trying to spread out the types of content that you're creating, like the format that it's delivered, as well as the channels? Like earlier, Sean, you said, you know, if you're only comfortable on two, just choose two. So then how do we also balance out allowing people enough variety of content, I think is what I'm asking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But you really, so overall, the variety is written, video, and then like storytelling on social, right? Like those kind of the three
Yeah.
spaces that you're thinking of,
Yeah.
or like, you know,
It could be this, a webinar, it could be a podcast, it could be images.
oh yeah.
There's plenty of
Yeah.
formats to choose from.
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of us are so busy now. Like I hear a lot of people saying, you know, I love the podcast because I can do something else while I'm listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's not something, unless you've got a reader, you know, that can read your PDF lead magnet or white paper or whatever. That's not something that's going to be easily translatable.
Mm-hmm. But for instance, like I am taking a recorded webinar that I did, and we're turning it into, I think, 9 social media posts in very short video pieces. And so some of that is just plain audio, that we're putting in, and we call them audio waves. Some of it is actual video, a really short, like, well, I say short, like a minute and a half kind of clip of that webinar. But there are ways, and I've heard lots of people like repurposing their podcast and throwing it into different formats, or like taking a webinar recording and using it as a your podcast, or like a section of your podcast where you do like a pre intro to, hey, this was a recorded clip, but it just seems so valuable, I had to share it, and things. So there's a lot of ways that you can take recordings, video recordings.
Yeah, and I mean, you can turn that into written content. You can turn that into an infographic. Like, I do agree. Like, your question is super valid, right? You've got limited resources, you've got limited time. How do you pick and choose? I mean, I think the reality is if you're all in on YouTube, you're looking for video people, right? Like, that's your audience, and it's not going to be you, Steph, and it's not going to be me, because I also loathe it and I now manage it, so I have to like it more. And I do like, there's something to be said for certain demographics who like certain types of formats. I will say, like, this is just my own observation. I don't have data to totally back it up, but like, I know more women who don't do video. And I do think it's part of it is just like how we interact with, how we consume things are like, I don't want to stereotype too badly, but I will say, like, you kind of have to know your audience and where they are. Because like, if your audience is heavy into video and you've learned that through like demographic information, right? Like, it's probably going to be valuable to be there over having a podcast, or being there over, some Instagram heavy, image heavy strategy. So I do feel like part of it is knowing your audience and knowing where they are. Finance, like, there's a video is huge. We have to be there. Podcasting is huge. We have to be there. I will say, like, forum usage is pretty high. Among certain types of investors, like Reddit, Wall Street Bets, like all these, like, there are things that you just have to learn about your audience and then figure out how to be part of that conversation and let that guide your strategy more than like what you want to do, because generally you are not your own audience.
Right.
See, I know. And I think we forget that really easily. But
Well,
like,
yeah,
I
because
wouldn't want to read that. Or
if
me,
you
I'm like, I hate video.
yeah, but you are doing a video thing right now. So, you know what I mean? It's a different form, but finding a way to make that work, right?
And I think
Yeah,
that's
and I
why we
think
see
some
so
of
many
it,
podcasts on YouTube, right? So like, they record a podcast, they're using what is it, Riverside, as their recorder, right? And so then it can be turned into YouTube. And so that is kind of a way that it's originated for the podcast viewing or listening platform, right? And then they're also repurposing it over on YouTube. But I think, like, in general, it goes back to what we were talking about, this audience piece. You have to know your audience. And if you provide it in written and some kind of audible, and if that's podcast or video, then you've covered your bases in that space. But it's all about that, like, really knowing the audience and how they're consuming.
Well, and if you do video, you also can take that transcript, plug it into a tool, and like have that help you write an article, right? That's based on that video, and embed that video into that article, and kind of bring it all together. But at least we do have tools, AI tools now that can really help you jumpstart a content creation so that you don't have to just like take that and start from ground zero, So I would recommend doing that too. Like, accessibility wise is one thing. I mean, consider search engines something with a disability where they favor text over everything else, right? They can understand that content best. So just making sure that you have all of that in place in ways that you can, get more mileage.
I love that. Yeah. Show notes for your podcast. That's interesting, because I did have a question around AI. So if maybe we can just touch on that briefly, because I know we're getting a little bit far along. But the AI piece and strategic delegation, so doing more with less, again, how would you like I know all of the no's that I tell people not to do, with AI. But what are some of the things that you would want anybody on this roundtable today to be like their number one takeaway for using AI in terms of repurposing or creation or whatever for their content strategy?
So, in my experience, and I've definitely been using it more and more, like ChatGPT and I are getting close. But like I would say like planning content, it's hugely helpful, right? And the more information that you can give it, the better it does. So if you've got a draft or something, giving your entire draft to a ChatGPT or an LLM of your choice, and then asking for improvements, better headers, like it does that really well, the more context that it has. I would say it's really bad still if you're trying to create from scratch with no context. And so that I would say that's like key. So for example, with YouTube, I use it to create YouTube descriptions and headlines, hashtags, all of it. And I take first we have like the video recorded. There's, we have scripts and all that, but I feed it the transcript of the episode. So the episode is uploaded and just in a draft mode. And then once it has that transcript, it can create accurate descriptions and headlines and ideas, right? Because it has the context of what that episode is actually about. And that's when I feel like what your output is a lot higher quality. So I guess I would caution people always about just like creating articles from nothing, and use it more for making a draft significantly better, or having it help you with an outline to start, and then taking it from there, then draft. But yeah, and then at the end, I mean, I usually just run an entire article through it and ask for some headline ideas, because it is really hard to create a bunch of headline ideas from scratch. At least for me, maybe some people have that brain, but it kind of just it saves so much time.
Yeah.
I totally
Yeah,
agree
I
with the
think
headline piece.
editing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to apologize for the
Um,
delay. I think it's getting worse as we go through.
I'm going to agree completely with the headline piece, but also I use it for the meta descriptions, because if you give it the full article and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for, the meta description and things. But kind of, in the sense of what Ali is saying is I use it for ideation. And if I get a new client and we don't know the industry as well as, or, we haven't worked with it, and I'm like, okay, what are the social media holidays? It'll tell me, right? Like we have this, client that's in the senior living space, and I needed to find out like when Grandparents' Day was and a bunch of different things that we didn't need to celebrate that holiday yet. And that wasn't in my repertoire of things. But I think also when you are working through drafts, to feed it back the final. Like, I think that's really commonly forgotten, is that you might be pulling something from, for ideation, but then like go ahead and feed it back your final so that it can start to like track how you think, how you want it to, be in the calls to action and the way that you summarize something at the end of the article and things like that. Also like using the prompt, hey, I'm drafting this article, and you can give it like 2 prompts. What am I missing? And have it, maybe you can pull out like a whole nother paragraph or something, but also then you can say from the perspective of, or if I was a nerdy blah, 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 what would I want to see in this article? And then it can then look at it through that lens, for kind of just like final ideas in a sense. So I use it way more on the ideation side, and not so much on the actual execution of like social captions and things like that. But then there are some really great tools. Like, for instance, Opus AI is a tool that you can chop up your podcast. Like, let's say if you're using, well, actually, Riverside has its own way to like divide up little clips and things too. But Opus is another one that you can create these small clips on video if you feed it a larger video. We don't use that with our clients because we have a really great video editor. We want to like get very succinct, but if that's, you know, you're keeping it in house and this is what you have, like it is a really good option. So using some tools like
Yeah.
that. What I think that's pretty much, yeah. There's a lot of great things, just don't use it too much. And like I made that social media post yesterday about not using bold fonts because one,
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're using a screen reader, it can't detect your bold fonts. It can't detect your italics. And here's the thing is if you're having to go to another tool to then bring it back over to LinkedIn, there's a reason LinkedIn doesn't want you to have it, right? But if you're writing a LinkedIn article, yeah, of course you can do bold fonts and things because it has it built in naturally. But if you're trying to like jimmy the system by doing something in addition, there's probably a reason that it's in not a go. So just
Yeah.
like trying to use too many tools also can hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I would also say too with that, so that with any of those AI tools, it's garbage in, garbage out. And I don't mean that you're putting garbage in intentionally, but I mean that it's still at the end of the day, it is a program. It's a piece of software that needs instruction in order to provide the output that you're looking for. And I have found it very helpful to, especially if I'm trying to keep my end target person in mind, to give it my client avatar to say, this is who I am and what I do. This is what I'm trying to achieve by giving you this information. And then it said, and then I always try to include, although sometimes I don't, ask me any clarifying questions that will allow you to provide, really whatever, emotionally intelligent output or really conversion focused output or whatever the thing is. But I can never, no matter how many prompts I give it at the beginning, I can never take the first output it gives me. That's always a rough draft. And always double check because it hallucinates, it comes up with data that doesn't exist, it makes up stuff. Sometimes I find, like I use it for the transcripts as well, Allie, and sometimes I'll say, point me to the timestamp where that person said that. And I go, oh, you're right, it didn't actually happen. And I go, what? So you still have to be super cautious. And it's no different from having an underling who's providing you with content. You're never going to just publish it without reading it over. So treat it the same way. It's like a junior staff member, maybe an intern. You're not going to allow it to just post stuff for you without checking that it actually matches your own goals and your own vision and mission and all of that stuff. So yeah, definitely, yeah, use with caution. It can be super helpful, but you got to use it with caution and understand. That's my person.
I like your prompt around like something that's more conversion focused. I also use like keyword optimized a lot as a phrase.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
like make this headline spicier, or like, hey, like give me 10 more headlines, but include this phrase, or
yeah.
this phrase, or include this company name in it. Yeah, the more guidance generally the better, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you use it for, so this might bring it back to this content strategy piece. Do you, I have used it with some success in the past, saying these are my last, like say if I went to LinkedIn and took the posts that I've made over the last 12 months that had the best engagement, not eyeballs, but the best like comments or whatever, or even which ones turned into conversations, like direct message, kind of things, and then said, what are the elements of these posts that might be usable now in a series of, whatever, to sort of take that stuff that I've already made and try to analyze it a little bit and try to bring in some of that strategic lens without having to read it all myself.
That's a great
That's
idea.
super smart.
Yeah, I love it. I would
What's the common thread?
I would do that for like
Yeah.
content, like articles that are succeeding. Like now I'm like, I should do that for our like stock market trends articles that we're focused on. Because yeah, sometimes you just don't see it. You're too close to it. Like
And I think
what
because I
no, you go.
okay, It's just that idea of, and coming back to like SEO, like you need to have some analytics, some data to back up any of these decisions that you're making. It can't be because you, like you said before, like we're not writing this content for ourselves. We're not doing this for our own reading consumption. There's a business goal in mind, whatever that business goal is. But you need to have some sort of data to tell you what's actually working and what isn't, because otherwise you're just going with your gut. And no offense, but none of us have the gut that tells us what's actually resonating with our people, because we don't know what they're actually reading without
Right.
those stats, you know?
That's true.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. I did have a couple of other questions, but I think we just chatted. I would like to maybe just in a few minutes, if you guys can touch on whether you think, like I hear a lot about SEO changing, you know, in the last, I certainly talk about how it's changed a lot in the last year, certainly. And Ali, like if you've been at it for 15 years, you've seen a lot of significant changes in that time. What do you see as the number one thing that founders should know about right now going into the remainder of 2025 and maybe even into 2026?
I have to limit it to one thing. There's so many things.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I mean, I would say that we are in a pretty significant period of change. This isn't the first time we've been in a significant period like this. There have been times in the past where, you know, like link penalties and, you know, the move to this more like content focused algorithm, you know, like there's been things this large, but I mean, it's hard not to say AI obviously as one of the big changes in both user behavior and also just what the search results look like, and the shrinking opportunity for particularly a lot of smaller businesses, which is a bummer because like Google's algorithm for years has been rewarding big brands, and they do it because big brands get a lot of branded search volume, they get a lot of direct traffic, like that. Those are all huge trust drivers. And so, you know, if people are constantly looking for a particular brand, they're seeking that brand out. That's like a huge, you know, it's seen as a trust signal. So with AI, like Google has rolled out AI overviews onto a lot of search results, in particular that are evergreen in nature. And that's just because Google's AI Gemini can actually train on what's in the search results, learn, you know, a topic, and then spit out an answer that's summarizing the search results. And they're citing sources, but they're getting significantly less click through. The last study I saw, it was like 34.5% less click through if there is an AI overview present in a search result. That's like, you know, if traffic is your metric, that's a bummer for you. But I guess I would question, like, why is traffic your primary driver, right? Like, I think in the end of the day, like we all still want to be driving conversion, and that might be less traffic, but now it's like, well, let's focus on qualified traffic, right? And there are going to be topics that once made sense to go after that may not anymore because Google has kind of eaten the search results with their own features. And that's fine, right? Because a lot of those things probably weren't a great fit for your business. Like, you know, they rolled out calculators years ago, and like, you don't need a calculator. Like, you know what I mean? Very rarely is that going to lead to business. So, like, don't waste your dev resources on something like that now. You know, something that's very basic and educational, like if it's out there thousands of times by all these different companies, it comes back to like your like logo for a business, right? Like you don't need to own that. That's fine. Give it up. Like focus on what you can go after. And what makes sense for your business. So like that's like one key thing that I think we're just going to need a lot of mind shift around. Um, Obviously user behavior with AI is changing. It's not changing as fast as I think people think it is, and I think we all as marketers have bias because we're using it so much. Like I feel like I live in Chat GPT these days in a lot of ways, but that's not a normal user. And that's not all traditional search behavior, right? I'm having ChatGPT do tasks for me.
True.
That isn't replacing Google. And the reality is that like people are using LLMs for traditional search, it's only like a very small percentage of what they would do in Google. And it's a very select group of users who are really comfortable with AI tools. And that's not most people. And so I just would caution people that like just because you are doesn't mean that's your user again, right? So it's like back to getting that like data on what your users are doing. So I feel like there's a lot of just having to answer to a lot of AI questions is obviously a big piece of my job. Other, I guess, search changes though, like people should really be aware and be following this DOJ trial with Google. We are going to get the remedies finalized in August, finally. But the DOJ might actually force Google to sell off Chrome. And if they do that, it's not going to happen overnight because there's going to be appeals. But if that does happen, Google's algorithm is largely built on user click data that they get through Chrome. And so, like, the algorithm is going to shift in a major way if they suddenly don't have access to that. So I think there's just a lot to be aware of. There's also some remedies that have been proposed that could end up in the end in this decision where Google has to like syndicate their ranking factors and their weighting of it. And that could create a lot of new search engines if suddenly all of that information is readily available. So, there's like a lot to be paying attention to. And I think that that case has been going on for long enough. It's been a couple of years that people have kind of forgotten about it. And obviously, our presidential administration has changed. But the people that are in the antitrust Department of Justice are pretty committed, I think, to continuing the course with this. So it will be really interesting just to see how that all pans out. But that's definitely not something on most people's radar.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. Yeah, Sean, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know how to follow up on that. That was so good. Let's see. I think just some lasting things at first on the social side is that don't think that you have to do this all alone. And if you do want to have control over it, like outsource to find a video editor. And maybe you find that on Upwork, right? And then you are still writing the captions because you want to have control over the voice and the tonality and things like that's fine. Going back to what you were talking about, this idea of sprints, have an accountability partner for your sprint. And maybe it's, hey, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to post twice a week on LinkedIn, and having somebody else that has a similar maybe social media goal. And then you can keep each other accountable and cheer them on that social media platform. So there's sometimes a lot of overwhelm with social because it feels like you should be doing something. And if you divide out some of the content creation, it can feel more collaborative and you might just get like re-energized a bit in that space. And I would say lead with gratitude when you're talking on social, when you can do shout outs or really showcasing someone in a really positive light, that goes a long way and it creates trust and it showcases like who you are as an individual too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that because I say this all the time, but women do business differently. And I think this idea of the way that we uplift and support our fellow business owners is just vastly different from what a lot of the other folks are doing. And even, how women in business support their local communities is different and, et cetera, et cetera. Like we just do things differently. So my thing would be to, and I see Catherine coming out, so I think we're running out of time. My thing would be to focus on your humans. Like a lot of this SEO stuff and these changes that we're talking about, it's really important. But honestly, I think it all comes down to your user journey and user experience on your website specifically. So a lot of this other stuff is kind of noise. And it's if your content is not created just for the algorithm, then it's going to be okay. Like if your content is still answering questions that your people have, providing them the information that they're actively looking for, it's going to work out. And your website is one of the tools in your arsenal, and they all have to play nice together, ideally. But yeah, choosing those, understand who your people are, or get started understanding them, and start experimenting maybe a little bit to see what does, get some legs. I think is a really great a great target. So Catherine, I know we're running out of time. I'd like to just sort of wrap this up. Were there any
Great.
questions that came through that I didn't see?
Nothing came through that you folks didn't answer. Great webinar today, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much. So I'll wrap it up then, because I know we're going just a couple minutes over time. I really appreciate you, Sean and Ali, for joining today. Catherine, thank you for signing on to help moderate. The point of these roundtables is to share awareness of all of the women in business that are, that we can showcase here, and also to provide hopefully really genuine and useful content for the people that are watching. From here, if this roundtable gets you thinking more strategically about your content, which was the whole point of this conversation today, and how that content shows up across your whole online presence, you may want to join us. We have a follow-up webinar. That's a smaller sort of a group thing. That's a deep dive. We're not about collecting clicks. We want to build some real influence. And so that takes clarity and consistency and a strategy that can put your expertise front and center. So what we're going to do is on August 26th, we're going to send an invitation to your email. I'm going to host a smaller webinar, and we'll walk you through how we've transformed 3 client websites using our rebuild service. Everything from a simple one-pager to a more complex, sort of conventional website, with an average of about 5.5 times more organic traffic across all of those projects. They're not visual rebrands, which I think is a really interesting piece to point out. In fact, one of the sites that I'm going to share during this webinar, it actually looks exactly the same as it did before, but it's under the hood that everything is performing on a whole different level. And so that's this power of having this strategic and intentional overview, when you go into these projects, that's really, really, really powerful. So we'll keep an eye on your inbox. We'll invite you, and I would love to have you there. And thank you again for all of you for putting your time and energy into this session. I know how busy we all are and how difficult it can be to find the time to do all of these fun things. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will stop the recording at this point.